Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Poema podcast. I am James Prescott, your host. Welcome to the show. It's really great to be with you all. And great to have you all back again with us. And today I have a new guest with us, which I'm always excited to have new guests on the show. And it's always fun getting to meet new people. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Justin Ancheta to the show. They are a writer, and they do a lot of advocacy for ace people and demisexuals, and we're going to talk a bit about it today. So welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. It's a real honor. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We have a couple of mutual friends as well. Elle Rose, who's been on this show, many of you will know. We both know them, and I recommended you highly, and so I'm excited to talk to you. So tell us a little about just introduce yourself, like briefly, about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Sorry, my sinuses are acting up. So what I am right now is I am a writer. I currently am in the middle of writing a series of posts on my Medium, which is basically looking at the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck from an ace, racialized, and disabled perspective. And that's because I'm a second generation Filipino Canadian immigrant, and I stutter. So that's kind of like that part of me. And I identify as, I have a lot of words to say about labels and micro labels and things like that. But the general term is biromantic demisexual. So I'm also on the bi spectrum, and I'm on the ace spectrum as well. And I mainly focus on my writing. I'm also a tarot reader as well, and that's kind of where the confluence of those two spheres came together. I'm working on several essays that I'm working on getting published in various literary journals, and I'm working on two projects actually. The first project is a kind of a further development of my blog series on my Medium page. So I'm basically turning that series of blog posts into a full book on asexuality and the tarot. And as well, I'm also working on a book of essays, creative nonfiction, hybrid experimental essays, that kind of look at the general theme of that book will be, or at least what I hope to be, is liminality, because I've come to see a lot my experience of disability, of race and culture, and of sexuality and queerness as being very much in a series of liminal spaces, where really I'm in neither one clear binary category or the other. It's kind of a strange sort of like in between space. That's kind of me in a nutshell, and I think anything else that I've missed will probably come out over the course of our conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure, and thank you for sharing all of that, and being so vulnerable too. And we're going to explore a few of those things tonight as well. There's so many things, there's so many areas we could cover, and I think, like as you say there, they kind of all bisect each other in some ways.
Yeah.
It is interesting that you talk about liminality because there's like such a crossover between disability and race and asexuality, and obviously there's prejudice against all three of those groups, and they kind of bisect, and also finding that liminal space. You're right, it must be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I were to talk about being ace, so part of my journey to be of finding asexuality and finding my queerness on the asexual spectrum was For the longest time, I didn't think asexuality was something that I could claim, something that I could identify with. I had a very close friend who I've known since childhood, and they were ace. They came out to me and they talked to me at length about their experiences, how they saw the world, how they saw their relationships, how they saw themselves and others sexually. And I thought, wow, a lot of this really resonates with how I experience the world, how I see the world, how I experience relationships, attractions, what my thoughts are towards sexuality. But not all of it really resonated with me. Not all of it fully described how I felt. And so I really thought for a long time that it just wasn't something, it wasn't a place, there was no place for me. And then when I came to learn much later that there is a spectrum, and that it's not just the binary of asexual and allosexual, that there is this whole gradient, this whole range of possibilities, then so much opened up to me. And this is kind of where the theme of liminality kind of comes in, because I'm not sure how much I'm guessing Elle has talked about this at length with you, but the way that I see it is that between allosexuality and asexuality in the strictest sense is gray sexuality, which is everything in between. And you could have folks who are kind of, I don't know, like 90% asexual. I mean, maybe they've never had sexual attraction to anyone in their lives, but they have one person or one instance where they actually felt something towards someone. And then you have people where their sexuality, their attractions and their asexuality is a lot more messier. It's a lot more, it's not something that simply refuses to be put into the strict binary of 1 and 0, of asexual and not asexual. And thankfully I wasn't around for this, but I think it was like the mid 2010s when, like, on Tumblr and on Aven, there was this whole like discourse about, like, are we really asexual? Do we really belong in the community? And I feel like we've moved past that, so that's great. But there is still that kind of like level of imposter syndrome where I'm in an asexual space, I'm in an asexual community, and I think, do I really belong here? I mean, I have had sex. I am sexually active. I have had relationships. I have had sexual attractions to people, but it's so far outside of the traditional traditional monosexual, compulsory heterosexual, cis heteronormative sphere, that bubble, that really asexuality is what most resonates with that. It's what best describes it. And then I also feel like the whole ace community as a whole is in this kind of is in something of a liminal space, because for a lot of people who don't understand or don't know or aren't familiar with it, there is that ongoing discourse about, like, whether or not ace people are, whether they belong in the queer community, whether they are LGBTQ2IA+, because of this constant association that people have with being queer, with being LGBTQ+, and being sexually active and being sexual. It's an ongoing trope where people who are gay, who are bi, who are non-binary, who are trans, who are whoever, are perceived to be sexually hyperactive, which is not true at all. Within the bi community, within the lesbian and the gay community, you'll find many, many people who express their attraction in ways that don't center sex or sexual attraction. So there's that kind of liminal space there. And I'm also, as someone who also has a bi plus identity, there is that additional layer of, bi people often not being seen as 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 sorry, as queer at all. My partner is a bi woman. I'm a bi man, and yet to Joe Bigot out there, we look like a common, ordinary heterosexual couple. So that issue of erasure there.
I mean, I have something similar. My partner is is demisexual as well, and yet we present like a, she's a white woman and I'm a white man, so we present like a normal heteronormative couple, but we're not. And yeah, absolutely. I resonate with that a lot, and yeah, like you say, there's a lot of, and I've talked about on this podcast with other people as well about how there's so much acephobia even within parts of the LGBTQ community as well, and how painful that can be, how damaging that can be. Yeah, yeah, that's really, really interesting. So, I mean, one of the things you talk about a lot, you've talked about in your introduction was tarot. Tarot is something we talked about on this. I've talked about on this podcast a lot with a few people that I've explored in my own kind of spiritual journey as well. So, how did kind of tarot come into your life, and how does it interact with your with your sexual identity in terms of being on the ace spectrum?
Yeah. So basically what happened was several years ago, I went through kind of a, I don't know. I mean, it almost seems cliche, right? You have your dark night of the soul kind of moment. You have that moment where just everything that you've taken for granted falls apart, and you've lost so much in terms of someone you care about, in terms of like your support structures, your relationships, and you're kind of left like trying to pick up the pieces and figure things out, and try to put yourself back together. And that's kind of what I went through. I was in a relationship for 8 years, and it was it ended in a really bad way, and that was my fault. There were a lot of conversations that should have happened that didn't happen, and that's on me. And then I jumped into another relationship, and that also ended really, really poorly. And it was all because I was trying to find something. And well, at the time, what I thought that I needed was sexual connection, was sex in the relationship. But what I later realized I really needed was actually connection, the genuineness and the honesty of having a real connection with someone, whether it be romantic or like non-romantic, queer, platonic, whatever. Just that connection with someone, something powerful, something intimate, something vulnerable. And in the midst of all that, I come from a Catholic background, and for me, growing up Catholic really left me with a lot of baggage, rooted in purity culture, which I'm sure that your American listeners will totally empathize with. This whole idea of like, this is how you are supposed to be in terms of a sexual being and a moral being. And amidst all of those things, like the relationships falling apart and me questioning my sexuality, that just got tossed out the window. And that having been a very defining part of my life for so long, I needed a new way to understand. I needed a new framework. I needed a new system. I needed a new, just a new paradigm, a new way to see myself and understand myself and process what I was feeling and what I was doing and my motivations. And it really all started with some friends of friends, some friends of my asexual friend who I talked about earlier. And it was really quite fascinating because they were kind of like they were in themselves kind of a liminal space, I would argue. Like they were sort of like not really Christian, kind of mystical Christian, but also like folk witchy and also like occult, and kind of kind of kind of a synth a synth synthesis of all of those disparate elements, kind of all brought together. And so like one day we'd be praying the rosary at a graveyard, and going to an Anglican cathedral and praying there. And then the next we would be like doing tarot and doing various rituals and such. And yeah, it was through them that I started to be introduced to the tarot. And it was scary at first. It was mysterious. What does the devil mean? Like, oh, that seems like a really bad card. And the Hanged Man and the Ten of Swords. Like, oh, those all evoked a really kind of rich feeling of dread and fear. But just something latched onto my brain where I just wanted to know more about these symbols. I wanted to know more about what they meant for me, and what they said about me. And that kind of started that journey where I borrowed a copy of Eden Gray's Mastering the Tarot, I believe, published way back in the 70s. And I just would go to cafes and just draw cards and just journal about them and read my book and do notes and just do that like day after day after day. And in the middle of all of that was the parallel process of me figuring out like, oh, I have the capacity to be sexually attracted to men, to mask presenting people. But it's not a sexual attraction in the conventional way. It's sexual attraction through this sort of asexual kind of other framework, other experience. And then I was learning about the asexual spectrum. I was reading articles I found on Google searches. I was doing tons of like online quizzes, like those BuzzFeed quizzes, things like that. So it was like three parallel lines, three parallel journeys all kind of merging and melding together. In that, as I was exploring myself as a bi person, I was exploring myself as an ace person, and I was exploring myself in the tarot as well. And so I think all those three things just kind of came together, and it's left me thinking about how useful tarot could be to other ace people, to other bi or queer people seeking to understand themselves better, going through what I went through, what I'm still kind of going through now in a way, trying to undergo this quest of seeking to understand themselves more, seeking a better sense of loving and understanding and having grace for themselves. And so what I find really great about tarot is that I'm always learning something new. There's always a new surprise. There's always a new insight, a new twist that comes out. And I find the same holds true for my own experience with asexuality. I'm always learning something new by encountering other people and learning their stories. The last 2 years, especially when I really became involved on Ace Twitter, it wasn't just getting involved with the community of Ace people, but the community of people who were Ace and and bi, or ace and trans, or ace and disabled, or ace and BIPOC, or ace and neurodivergent, and learning about how intersectionality is such an important part of our community and our experience.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that a lot of the people I know who are practitioners of tarot are either on the ace spectrum or LGBTQI, or
Yeah.
and it's a very interesting dynamic. And I've certainly found a lot of guidance and a lot of reassurance on my journey through that.
Yeah.
And I think it's given my background, I came from the church ultimately, originally the Christian church, the Methodist church. So I never thought I'd be even remotely interested in tarot, and I got warned off it, and I got all the kind of I had somebody tell me they didn't want to. I think I remember somebody didn't want to date me because I was into tarot. I think.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, I mean, this is like years ago. Like I can't remember, 4 or 5 years ago at least. Yeah, I know it's ridiculous, but like because it was heretical and that kind of thing. All the kind of nonsense. But
I did want to say that there was a time where early in my time at the tarot where I was obsessed with finding a Christian tarot deck, and I did research on the internet because I still needed, and I really needed at that time a bridge between a lot of the things that I really enjoyed and loved and valued about being Catholic and that experience, and this new nebulous kind of occult, Wiccan, witchy, whatever world out there. And it was funny because I looked at all these decks. I looked at the Connolly Tarot, the Tarot of the Saints, the Tarot of the Cloisters. I looked at the Golden Tarot of the Tsar. These are all decks that have some level of Christian reference or are aimed at people coming out of Christian communities who wanted a more kind of gentle, sort of like experience. And the thing was, I realized the most Christian tarot deck is actually the original RWS. Actually, the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck published in the UK in 1909. And it made sense to me because the Order of the Golden Dawn, at least well, actually, I wouldn't want to go, maybe not there, but like, there's so much Christian imagery in the RWS, like the Ace of Cups. Like you look at it and it's like, oh, boom, that's a Eucharistic cup. Like that's the cup with the Eucharist, right? Yeah. And you look at the five of Wands, and immediately I think, oh, that's when Jesus says, "Do you think I came to bring peace? But no, I came to bring a sword. I came to bring division, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3." I mean, there are all kinds of like biblical phrases you can weave into and reference in the deck, and I think it says a lot when. Hopefully the historians in the audience aren't going to totally like castigate me, but I remember that I think Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith had Christian backgrounds, so certainly that would have played some influence in the design of the deck. And Pamela Coleman Smith, the artist of the RWS, herself converted to Catholicism later on in life. So it's really amusing when people think of like the tarot as like demonic or evil, when in fact it's a really fascinating articulation of Christian ideas and Christian beliefs, and it's a very challenging articulation of Christian beliefs and ideas and symbology.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you said that, because I'm still a big fan of all the kind of old Celtic liturgies, and I was in Church of England church, and I love the contemplative prayer. I love silent prayer. I
Mm-hmm.
love Tese.
Yeah.
All of that. Oh, I love all those things. I still love them. And and yeah, I mean, now you've talked about that. That's really interesting. That I would move. That probably made my move to explore tarot more easy, because now thinking about that connection, it makes sense. Someone who is into a lot of liturgical things would naturally gravitate towards tarot and find it relatively. I mean, I didn't find it a challenging step when I did kind of explore it for the first time and had readings for the first time. So that's probably why, and that's really interesting. I mean, something I'd not heard before, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Tese, contemplative prayer, like uh, the Celtic liturgies. That to me is the best part of Christianity. It's
Yeah.
the part that really puts me in touch with the universe, with the Creator, with God, the Spirit, with Christ. It just really resonates with me in a way that, and I've been to various churches, Protestant and etc. And I mean, I'm sure that for a lot of people, those are very powerful, very special, very important. But for me personally, yeah, like I found that really resonated with me, and that it really helped to instill and encourage in me that sense of exploring your inner space. Which, to go back to the topic of of being sorry, stuttering's getting the better of me. Um, like when someone realizes that they're not straight, when they're possibly bi, when they're gay. I mean, Heartstopper is a great example of this. Um, it challenges you to look inward. It challenges you to question all the things that you thought were true about yourself, which were probably things fed into you by parents, community, church, teachers, whoever. You you've built all of these structures up, and you feel safety in them, and then all of a sudden you find a guy and you just fall head over heels in love with them, and then you're like, wow, I have to basically question everything about myself. And it's that kind of journey that I think really speaks to that. And I think the tarot really speaks so powerfully to that journey. Um, the Fool's Journey in the Major Arcana, for example, being a big part of that, and all of the journeys we see in the Minor Arcana as well. And to me, that's why I think that the queer experience in tarot fits so well. And I think it's you really touch on the interesting point that a lot of tarot folk out there are queer or very not non-normative, because the tarot asks you, it challenges you, it encourages you to look inward and to look to if you don't mind like the woo woo kind of detour, but like it encourages you to communicate to spirit, to whatever is out there, in a way that is not, I kind of want to say, tainted by capitalistic, excessively grossly patriarchal, imperialist structures like the church, like patriarchal society, like compulsory sexuality, that want to impose labels and limits on who you are and what you can be. And that's why I find that the tarot is so powerful in that. I think one book that really helped me with that was reading Cassandra Snow's book, Queering the Tarot, which was released in, I think, 2019, 2018. And it was a great book, and it really inspired me to write the book I'm working on now, because the tarot, I mean, a lot of people read into the tarot a lot of compulsory sexual connotations. The Lovers is a good example of that. The Two of Cups, the Four of Wands. What else? the Ten of Cups, like people think, or the Three of Swords, people think about, oh, like sexual relationships. Am I going to find a new partner? Am I going to find a hookup? Am I going to do this and that? And I don't know. I think that the tarot can speak not just to the experiences of people who are allosexual, but I think it can also speak very, very deeply to the experiences of people who are ace and arrow. I think the Lovers is a good example of that. It's a card that's often associated with like sexual love and, oh, you're going to find a new boyfriend and you're going to have a hot night. When in fact, if you like trace the history of it back to decks like the Tarot de Marseille, um, the Lovers is actually a card about choices. It's a card about decisions, which really changes the narrative substantially. If you're an ace person and that card comes up in a reading, then it says, you have a choice. You can go with you with your passions. You can go with what you really like want to passionately go for. Like maybe you're passionate about asexual issues. So maybe you want to do a full like degree in like sexuality studies or sociology. Maybe you want to be like Kenton Weiner. Kenton's done a huge amount of work studying ace experiences and linking them back to experiences in the wider queer community. Or maybe you want to do something else. Maybe logically you want to focus on developing your community, your relationships, your friendships. Maybe you want to work on yourself more. Maybe I could go on, but that's one example of how that card can really resonate, can really add a lot to the conversation about being ace. And it's not just a card about sex or love.
I love that. Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear some of the history behind some of these cards because somebody, certainly for me, coming into tarot and not being a practitioner, but it's fascinating to hear the real history and the real stories behind it, and how often it's easy to westernize some of the meanings of these cards, right? And like you say, like the Lovers. Oh, that means they're going to meet someone and they're going to have a lot of sex. It means they're going to have a great relationship, whatever. Like that's how we try to kind of fit it into Western perceptions of what normal is or what the world is. But actually, there's a lot more to it, and that's really fascinating. And that means it can be more accessible for everyone, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So how is this kind of how do these intersections manifest themselves in your kind of day-to-day life?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think in my day-to-day life, I'm just someone who's just caught up in their head a lot, and so I feel like every day I'm just thinking about things. I'm thinking about how I present to the world being racialized, how I present to the world being a non-normative male. In online spaces, like how do I present as someone who identifies as disabled, and in communities like as a BIPOC person, as a racialized person, like how does like when I'm I don't do it so much now because I'm trying to be as COVID careful as I can. But when I'm going into a new queer community or a new queer space, for example, I mean, all these like alarm bells go off. All of these like anxieties like rise to the surface, and I think like, am I queer enough to be in here? Do I belong here? Like, I notice everyone else here is white, but I'm not. Like, like, like okay, like I mean that I feel nervous because of that. And then I open my mouth, and then everyone's going to know that I'm not, that there's something wrong, heavy air quotes, wrong with me. That's another layer. um, so it's part of that sort of like, I really don't know what to call it, like hypervigilance, is it? Maybe just anxiety of navigating navigating the world as someone who's not white, who's not fully able-bodied. I published an essay in Carte Blanche magazine in June, and it really spoke to that experience where it's like, am I really disabled? Like, can I say that? I mean, I'm not using a wheelchair or a mobility device. I'm not blind. I'm not deaf. But you know, half the time, half the day, I cannot say anything. I cannot form the words. Asking a bus driver for directions, forget it. Like going to the bank, buying groceries, I just can't do it. Just anything that requires speaking is almost impossible for me. And because stuttering is such an ephemeral condition, in that, like, one day you can be totally fluent, one day you're not. There is a kind of, it sort of does my head in sometimes. So much so that for the longest time, I didn't even want to think about that question, because it just was too much for me to think about. And that also kind of intersects with being ace, because we live in such a hypersexualized world. We live in a world where everyone just assumes you're either fucking or you're not. And if you're not fucking, well, what's wrong with you? You're probably like you're either an incel or like a socially stunted virgin type. I don't know. And then, there's race on top of that, because especially for Black people, because Black people, especially Black men, Black women in their own ways, have been hypersexualized by society. Yeah. So I think for me, that's how those intersections manifest. I find myself just always thinking about them, and I find myself even afraid of how those manifestations might affect me when I'm out in the world trying to live my life and trying to connect with other people. If I wasn't with my partner now, I would have no idea what to do with myself. I feel like dating, like, forget it. I can't even imagine that.
I know.
Like,
yeah.
Dating, oh my! I can't think about. I think about how Elle has talked about talked about their experience with dating apps on social media, and I can't even.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I can't imagine going back out there again. I never want to do that again. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all of that. Really great. It's been so great to hear from you, Justin. It's been fantastic. I mean, just to kind of, I guess, to close out, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned on your journey that you'd like others to know?
Oh, wow. I would say that the biggest lesson is just to be open. Well, no, actually, I would say the biggest lesson is to be kind to yourself. Just be kind to yourself. I feel like I lost a lot of time because I was beating myself up over not knowing this, or mentally self-flagellating myself over not knowing that, or not communicating in the right way, or not doing this or not doing that. And we are only human, and we're all on a collective journey together, trying to be better today than we were yesterday. And tomorrow morning we'll wake up and think, how are we going to be better people? How am I going to be better? How am I going to show up? And there are many times where we aren't, where we don't. And that's just a part of living. It's part of life. And I mean, at the risk of sounding cliche, like, we just have to be good to ourselves. And if we're good to ourselves, we can be good to other people. And that helps us to be more empathetic, more more empathic, more open to other people's experiences. And through that, that's how we are open ourselves to change, how we're open to evolving in how we see ourselves in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality, in terms of religion. So yeah, to kind of round it all, to kind of wrap it all up in a bow, be kind to yourself. Please, I'm begging you, be kind to yourself, because you are beautiful, wonderful people out there. And there's so much darkness out there already. If you can find any way to nurture the light inside yourself, please do that.
Awesome. I love that so much.
Thank
I
you.
really do. Thank you, Justin. And how can people connect with you and your writing?
Yeah. So on Twitter and Instagram, I am Rampancy, Rampancy. It's a reference to Bungie Software's marathon games from like the the 90s, if anyone knows those. And my Medium page, which I'm going to try to bring up. Well, do you have show notes?
I do.
Yeah. So I think it's like medium.com/janchetta25. But I will give you the link to my writing there. And there you can read all of the posts I have up for the Asexuality and the Tarot series. I just finished doing the pages, because I'm now in the court cards, and then in the next few weeks I'll put up my post on the queens, the Queen of Swords, Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Cups, and the Queen of Wands. And I'm also hoping to do a review of Michelle Kiranskaya's Ace Notes. I'm actually in that. I'm in the back in one of the interviewee sections. And yeah, I really want to do more writing on my Medium on my Medium blog, touching on queer issues and ace issues, as I always have been on Twitter.
Fantastic. Great. Go and check those out. I really encourage everyone to do that and give Justin a follow on Twitter as well. I'm sure we'll have you back on the show sometime. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
So, especially when your book comes out. When your book's ready, we'll get you back and talk about it for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want, folks to talk about more ace stuff, if you want folks to talk about more about tarot, I have a lot to say about queer issues and online discourse, the intersection of asexuality, the intersections of queerness and disability and race.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have you back, probably more than once, I hope. So thanks for coming on the show, Justin.
Thanks a lot.
And thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks. Take care. See you.